Hello and welcome to another episode of Building History. I am your builder Ben, and on today's episode we are building the Tamiya P-38H Lightning in 1/48 scale, as well as our customary brief look into the history of the plane and the pilots that flew her. We want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. We sincerely appreciate it. Please give this video a quick like, subscribe if you can. That very much helps the channel and we can produce more of these videos with increasing regularity. Now, I finished this model with some markings that, much like the World War II actual counterparts, where many of the planes were named after wives or girlfriends back home, this one as well is named after my beautiful wife, Rebecca. Speaking of, here she is, Mrs. Building History. Please, let's take it away with the P-38 Lightning.
The Lockheed P-38 Lightning was the only U.S. fighter aircraft that was in production throughout the war. In total, 992 airframes were built before the cessation of production. It was responsible for downing more aircraft than any other fighter in the war and was flown by the top U.S. aces of the war. In February 1937, USAAC, which stands for the U.S. Army Air Corps, issued Circular Proposal X-608, which is a fancy title for setting performance goals for a new high-altitude interceptor. The word interceptor was used in the proposal to bypass the current USAAC requirements that pursuit aircraft were not to carry more than 500 pounds of ordnance, including ammunition. First Lieutenant Ben Kelsey, one of the authors of the new proposal, wanted a minimum of 1,000 pounds of ordnance, a maximum speed of 360 miles per hour, and a climb to 20,000 feet within 6 minutes. Lockheed won the competition on June 23, 1937, and construction began in July of 1938 in an old bourbon distillery. Okay, that's kind of cool. Kelly Johnson said that this was the first of 5 skunk work locations.
More like drunk as a skunk works. Am I right?
The XP-38 made its first flight on January 23, 1939. It was the first military airplane to exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight. Seeing the potential of the XP-38 speed, the Army Air Corps decided to go after the transcontinental speed record then held by the eccentric Howard Hughes. In a flight from March Field in California to Mitchell Field in New York, the XP-38 shattered the record by 23 minutes. However, no one bothered to alert the personnel at Mitchell Field that the experimental airplane was coming. I see where this is going. And he was ordered to circle while other aircraft landed first. Some reports claim that the XP-38 ran out of fuel while waiting, a claim I personally find doubtful. Well, not me specifically. The other claim, which I personally subscribe to, again, not me, which has obviously more credence, is that while waiting, the aircraft developed carburetor ice, which led the airplane to crash. Luckily, the test pilot survived. However, the only XP-38 prototype was destroyed. The YP-38 testing program was set back due to early compressibility issues that led to redesigns of the airframe. Most notably were the P-38's famous outwardly rotating props, which was opposite of just about every other prop-driven plane. This change was due to early model P-38s being extremely difficult to control in the event of an engine failure, particularly on takeoff. Due to the high torque, in the event of an engine failure on takeoff, the plane had a nasty habit of rolling over and, well, crashing. The P-38's nose bristled with weaponry. 4 50 cal machine guns surrounding a 20mm cannon. This weapon configuration in combination with the twin engines led to a very stable weapons platform. Good pilots could routinely shoot targets further than their counterparts in airplanes with wing-mounted machine guns. Because the guns were mounted in the nose, they didn't have to be sighted to converge on a particular point in space, the way wing-mounted guns were, which meant the P-38 could accurately hit targets at any point, all the way out to 1,000 yards. The first orders for the P-38 were made by Britain and France, whom ordered a combined total of 667 aircraft. France fell before any deliveries could be made, and Britain took over the entirety of the order. In fact, it was Britain that gave the P-38s its name, the Lightning. Lockheed originally wanted to name the fighter Atalanta, after the heroine from Greek mythology. Yeah, I definitely like the Lightning name better. Luckily, the British nickname stuck. The Lightning had been designed as a high-altitude fighter. However, Britain envisioned using their P-38s at low levels, so they ordered their planes without the turbo superchargers, resulting in an abysmally, I can't say that word, abysmally performing airplane, and Britain canceled the order after taking receipt of only 3 aircraft. Well, that's your own damn fault, Britain. The first PA-38s under U.S. command were sent to Europe due to the asinine Europe First policy, but that's a story for another time. The Lightning didn't fare well in Europe. It was, however, the first Allied fighter that was capable of escorting bombers over Germany. It quickly became an excellent photo recon platform, a role in which it excelled in the European theater. Throughout the war, near 90% of the photo reconnaissance in Europe was performed by P-38s. In the Pacific is where the P-38s truly excelled, so much so that the plane had almost become synonymous with the theater. The top-scoring pilots of the USAAC in the Pacific all flew P-38s. The main Japanese fighters could outrun and outclimb the Lightning, but the Lightning was faster, so pilots would typically remain fast, keeping the speed up as they made running passes at the enemy planes, rather than get into a turning dogfight. The P-38H variant that this model is representing boasted more powerful engines. The Allison V-1710-89/91, producing 1,425 horsepower each. However, it was limited to 1,240 horsepower because the cooling system was insufficient to deal with the heat the engine produced at maximum power. It also had the new M2C 20mm cannon, and its underwing pylons had a capacity for 1,600 pounds. It had a maximum speed of 402 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, cruised at 250 miles per hour, and had a 40,000-foot ceiling. General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, in a bid to boost morale, had legendary World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker give his men a pep talk. It's unknown how much the talk worked in boosting the waning morale of his men. However, his challenge to the men afterward sure did. He challenged his pirates to beat Rickenbacker's score of 26 confirmed victories, and with that, the race was on. 2 pilots pulled out ahead on the leaderboard, Thomas Maguire and Richard Bong, both of whom flew multiple variants of the P-38, including the H model, and neither would survive the war. Charles Lindbergh, during World War II, was a consultant for United Aircraft. He was sent to the Pacific to observe Corsair units, a plane that had a United Aircraft engine in it. Vought, who was the Corsair manufacturer, was also interested in developing a twin-engine fighter. In working with General Kenney, he got Lindbergh over from the 475th Fighter Group to observe the P-38s in action. During his time with the 475th, he not only observed, but he flew on combat missions as well, and was instrumental in doubling the P-38's range from 900 to 1,800 miles. Lindbergh was able to increase the combat time of around 6.5 hours to 12 to 14 hours, using his fuel-saving measures with no increase in engine wear or breakdown. Lindbergh and Maguire became quite close during this time. On July 28, 1944, Charles Lindbergh was flying with the 475th on a bomber escort mission when, as a civilian, he shot down a Japanese fighter. He writes about the shootdown in his diary, quote,
"We jettisoned our tanks, switched on our guns, and nosed down to the attack. One Jap plane banks sharply toward the airstrip and the protection of the anti-aircraft guns. The second heads off into the haze and clouds. Colonel McDonald gets a full deflection shot at the first, starts him smoking, and forces him to reverse his bank. We are spaced 1,000 feet apart. Captain Miller gets in a short deflection burst with no noticeable effect. I start firing as the plane is completing its turn in my direction. I see the tracers and the 20s,
which are 20mm cannons,
find their mark, a hail of shells directly on the target. But he straightens out and flies directly towards me. I hold the trigger down and my sight on his engine as we approach head-on. My tracers and my 20s splatter on his airplane. We are close, too close, hurtling at each other at more than 500 miles an hour. I pull back on the controls. His plane zooms suddenly upward with extraordinary sharpness. I pull back with all my strength I have. Will we hit? His plane, before a slender toy in my sight, looms huge in size. A second passes, 2, 3. I can see the finning on his engine cylinders. There is a rough jolt of air as he shoots past behind me. By how much did we miss? 10 feet? Probably less than that. There was no time to consider or feel afraid. I am climbing steeply. I bank to my left. No, that'll take me back into the Ack fire above Amahai Strip. I reverse to the right. It is all taken seconds.
End quote. Richard Bong is America's highest scoring ace, not only of World War II, but of all time, with 40 confirmed aerial victories. In April of 1944, Bong downed his 27th plane and became the first U.S. pilot to surpass Eddie Rickenbacker's score of 26. He was then sent back stateside in the summer of 44 on a war bond tour. In that September, was sent back to the Pacific, this time as a gunnery instructor with specific instructions from General Kenney to avoid combat. The Army was reluctant to lose America's leading ace, and by October he was grounded after scoring 3 more. Good for him, bringing his total victories up to 30. However, now having landed in the Philippines, the Army needed all the help they could get, and he used this opportunity to talk his way back into the cockpit. And by November 15th, he had his 38th victory. General Kenney recommended Bong for the Medal of Honor, which was awarded personally by General MacArthur. On December 17th, Bong had shot down his 40th airplane. Nearly half of his total victories came after He had completed 158 combat missions and thus was no longer required to fly such missions. Kenny grounded him again and sent him back to the States. The Army was no longer willing to risk their all-time leading ace and now Medal of Honor recipient getting shot down or captured by the Japanese. Bong became a test pilot stateside, testing the new jet-powered P-80 Shooting Star for Lockheed. On August 6, 1945, just as he became airborne, the engine flamed out and the airplane crashed, killing him instantly. America's ace of aces in all wars, dead at 25. Richard Bong is perhaps destined to hold that title for all time, since new technologies make running up a tally that high increasingly unlikely. Headlines of his death shared front page space with the droppings of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, which occurred that same day. He had named his P-38 in the war Marge, his future wife, after he was only 25? Yeah. Damn! He met her while on the war bond tour in 1944. This plane was being flown by another pilot when it suffered an engine failure and crashed in New Guinea. The plane was recently found and identified in May of 2024, and recovery efforts are still ongoing. With Richard Bong grounded and headed for the States, there was now opportunity for Tommy Maguire to take the lead. Maguire originally had been stationed in Alaska, however, in 1943, he asked to be reassigned to somewhere there was much more action. His request was approved, and he was sent to the 475th Fighter Group, Satan's Angels, which was comprised entirely of P-38 Lightnings. In January of 1945, Maguire was sitting at 38 victories, only 2 behind Bong's total. On the 7th, he took off with 3 other Lightnings loaded with 160-gallon external fuel tanks. The mission was fighter sweep over Negros Island in the Philippines, with the aim of getting Maguire his 3 kills in order to take the Ace of Ace titles from Bong. According to various sources, the mission was not officially authorized. During the flight, a lone Japanese Ki-43 was spotted heading in the opposite direction. They passed each other, but the Japanese pilot turned to attack, scoring a hit on Douglas Thrope's P-38. Jack Rittmeyer opened fire. However, instead of breaking off and running for home, the Ki-43 slipped away from Rittmeyer and opened fire on Edwin Weaver, Maguire's wingman. Normally, drop tanks would have been jettisoned before engaging in this dogfight, but today they weren't. The sources differ. Some say Maguire ordered them not to be in order to have more fuel for hunting more Japanese fighters. Others claim they couldn't be dropped because Maguire was already in the turn to help Weaver, and the tanks couldn't be dropped during a turn. In either case, in the tight turn that Maguire had placed his Lightning in, strained to get around and to get an angle on the Japanese planes attacking his wingman, his fighter began to buffet, burdened with the extra weight and drag of the drop tanks. And instead of backing off, he was seen further increasing the turn. The P-38 entered into an accelerated stall and spun down. With barely 1,000 feet of altitude, there wasn't enough time for recovery. Thomas Maguire was killed while attempting to come to the aid of his wingman. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor and finished the war as the second highest scoring American ace with 36 confirmed victories. Maguire named all his P-38s Pudgy, after his wife, adding a numerical addendum culminating with Pudgy 5. Today, a replica of his plane, Pudgy 5, sits at the main gate of Maguire Air Force Base in New Jersey, which was named in his honor. The P-38, due to not only its unique design but also its service record, will forever be ingrained in our memories. The plane had some teething problems, yet it came out of the war as one of the most successful airframes of all time. It had a particular beauty in its lines that hid its lethality of its history. It's an airplane that is fully entwined with World War II, and in particular the war in the Pacific. Thanks for joining us on this Building Histories episode of the P-38. I don't know about you, but I certainly learned some interesting fun facts today. If you like this video, go ahead and hit subscribe and the like button. You can leave a comment as well. If you're feeling frisky, you're welcome to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or send us an email with things you liked about the video or maybe things you'd like to see built on upcoming episodes of Building History.
That'll do it for us today. I was Ben. That's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.
Take care.